Welcome to The More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. This week, Sue Kolinsky returns for part 2 of the podcast interview we did with her, in which she talks about her career producing the Osbournes and as a writer on Ellen and other shows. It's a fun and fascinating look at the entertainment industry, and we think you'll enjoy it. Here's part 2 of that interview. Sue Kolinsky and I met sometime around 1979 or 1980 at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles when we were both starting out as comics. Sue, did you start out in L.A. or had you done it someplace else and then moved to L.A.?
I started in New York, and first time I went on stage was like 1978 or 9 or something like that. And I actually was in a relationship with somebody who broke my heart, and I said, I have to get out of New York. And I drove cross country.
Sorry about that, by the way.
Yeah, really, Ward. So I drove cross country with a couple of friends, one who ended up becoming a pretty big deal actor, Dan Fishman. Do you remember him?
Oh, sure.
Class?
Very
Dan
nice guy.
And a girlfriend of mine who I went to summer camp with ended up driving out to LA, and I lived there for around 4 years and went right to the Comedy Store. And then ended up going back to New York. But I started in New York. My first time on stage was at the Improv in New York.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I started at the comic strip and then started working at the Improv in New York before I moved out to LA. I never made it to Catch a Rising Star. Mm-hmm. I think I auditioned there once or twice, but never became a regular. Ward, when did you start in stand-up? It was a little after us.
I started 1991. I was a freshman in university, at the University of Georgia.
And where was your first? Where was that? I mean, where did you go on stage?
Okay, so there was actually a young comedians club, young comedians group at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia. I went to school, and they did shows around campus and at bars around Athens. And you're talking about Athens, Georgia, in the height of its popularity when it came to music and entertainment. REM was the number one band in the world in 1991, right? And so live entertainment in general in Athens was everywhere, and there were all kinds of places we did shows, but never in, quote unquote, a comedy club. We made our own comedy shows and did them around campus and did them at local bars. And that's where I started. I've had a career in show business for 25 years and been a touring comedian and all that, and I've actually only been to LA once, and I've never been to any of the clubs there. Never been to the Improv, never been to the Comedy Store. Anything. I've had a career in this business. I know everybody in LA, and I've only been once in my life, and I've never performed at the clubs there. But you guys mentioned the Comedy Store and all that. I probably owe my comedy career to Pauly Shore, so there is that kind of connection there. So,
because you met him on the road.
That, right?
You met him on the road.
I did.
Okay,
I did, and he gave me a lot of work and opportunities, and made some calls on my behalf.
Right,
and that's why I wound up working.
Well, the road. I mean, that's what made all of us.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, yeah. I never actually worked the road, but I want to go back, Sue, and ask you. So there were cliques at the Comedy Store, people that were like Mitzy's, godchildren and stuff like that. Were you ever in any of those cliques? Were there any famous people that you hung out with and did coke with, or any of that?
The listeners that maybe don't know, Mitzy Shore owned the Comedy Store.
Okay. Well, it's funny that you bring up me and Mitzy Shore because when I started there, I passed my first time, and Robert Schimmel was one of the comedians, that I befriended early on. And we passed the same night.
Great guy.
And I worked there for, I guess for maybe a year or so. And that's when most of the women worked in the belly room. Very few were given the opportunity to work in the original room or the main room. And
just for the audience, the belly room was a small room upstairs that Mitzy converted into a showroom. It only sat about 50 or 60 people, I think, maybe 80. It was small. And she turned it into a small room that was dedicated to female comedians. So
Argus Hamilton, who was her boyfriend at the time, he was much younger than her, a political comedian, very, very funny, and very, very respected. He used to come up to the belly room a lot and watch my act and just thought I was really funny. He had no designs on me. He was, kind of a rascal with women. And I know that he cheated on Mitzy repeatedly. I was probably the only woman that he never, ever came on to. He just thought I was very, very funny. So
And you were.
Oh, thank you. So he got in Mitzy's ear about me and said, you got to, just watch Sue Kolinsky. She's really, really funny. And she took that as he liking me and thinking that I was cute and whatever. And
you were.
Why, thank you. And then she was cleaning house. And I was one of the comedians she didn't want working there anymore. And I later found out that the reason why she didn't want me working there is because she thought I was having an affair with Argus.
Oh.
And he never said anything different that I know of. And one night, many months later, and it was so sad to me because at that time, you worked one club. I wasn't, I put no eggs in the improv basket. I was a Comedy Store act. And I don't think Bud would have really cared, but that's where I was putting all my attention. All my friends were Comedy Store acts. So one night I'm up in the belly room. And I wasn't banned from the club, but she just wouldn't let me on stage there anymore. So Lucy Webb, who was the MC that night, someone didn't show up. And I just happened to be there. And she said, would you go on stage? You got to do me a favor because we don't have any other comedians here. And I said, I'm not going on stage because if Mitzy comes up here, if there's any chance of me coming back into the club, I am not going to go on stage because if she sees me, it's not going to be good. And she said, she never, ever comes up here, please. And if she does come up, I got your back. Well, I'm on stage for 5 minutes. And all of a sudden I hear from the back of the room, get her off. And I was like, oh my God. So she kicked me out. Lucy never, ever defended me. And this was at the time when the Westwood Comedy Store was up. So Sam Kinison used to host there a lot, and he loved me. And he used to put me on there. And the first time he said to me, just go on, don't worry about it. She never comes here. And I said, yeah, well, I've heard that before. And he said, no, I'm telling you, she never, ever comes to Westwood. And she didn't. And he used to put me on all the time there without her knowing about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so now you, me and Bob, I think we hung out quite a bit. And I don't know whether you know this, but Bob and I tried writing some stuff together. And I've told this story on the show before. We almost sold a joke to Dave Letterman. We wrote 7 pages of material. We gave it to Merrill Marco, who was his girlfriend at the time, but also was known to be his head writer. Mm-hmm. And this was when he was just starting to guest host The Tonight Show. I think he was getting ready to do his second shot as a guest host. And I gave Merrill 7 pages of stuff that Bob and I wrote. And by the way, if people don't know, Robert Schimmel went on to be a very successful comedian in his own right, incredibly funny guy, very nice guy. But this is
one of my idols. I just want to say that.
But this is before any of us had done anything really. And Letterman calls me up. I was working on a game show. I had my first TV job writing a game show. And he calls me up and tells me there's one line in there that I want to use and I'll pay you $25 for it. And I happen to know that he was paying other guys a lot more. This name will mean something to you, Sue. Wayne Klein was a writer back then. Mm-hmm. And we were friends. So I knew that he was getting like $75, $100 a line. So I said to Dave, gee, I think that's a little low. Can you do a little better? Can you go to 50? And he's going, I'm not sure that line is worth it, And I said, well, I co-wrote this with Bob. We're going to share it. Let's meet halfway. Give us 35. At this point, I'm just looking to save face. Because once you've started a negotiation, you don't want to just go back to it, what the first offer was.
Yeah.
And I figured $10. He had signed $1 million contract with NBC back when $1 million was real money. Mm-hmm. And he said, let me think about it. He called me back 10 minutes later. He said, I just don't think it's worth more than $25. So I never sold him the line. I never wrote for Dave Letterman again. Probably one of the bigger mistakes I made in my career.
Now, did you continue how you being friends with Bob throughout the years?
Yes, we could. Well, we were not as close, and I'll tell you that story. So Bob and I were writing stuff together, and we would write sketches and spec scripts and everything. And Bob knew a guy who managed writers named Jackie Kahane. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you guys remember that name.
Yeah, sure.
And he was really a very small shop. But to us, again, having no representation, wow, a guy who manages writers is interested in us. So Bob said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, Kev. We're a team now. I'll take our stuff to Jackie's office and hand it in and blah, blah, blah. So we're doing this for a couple of months, Sue. And then one day I get a call from Jackie, who I had never met because Bob was our connection. Mm-hmm. And he was a gruff cigar smoking guy. He had a very deep way. He'd go, hey, Kevin, this is Jackie Kahane. That's how we always say, this is Jackie Kahane. And I said, hi, Jackie, nice to make your acquaintance. He says, listen, I got a problem. He says, Bob Schimmel comes into my office every couple of days with material that says written by Bob Schimmel and Kevin Kelton on it. And I'm reading it and I'm laughing. And then occasionally he gives me stuff that just says Bob Schimmel on it. And I'm not laughing. So after a while, I figure the writer I like here is Kevin Kelton. So I don't want to represent the two of you. I just want to represent you. And I said, Jackie, wow, I'm honored, and it's a compliment, but Bob's my friend, and I don't. This is a really awkward thing, but I wanted it because again, I wanted a break for myself. So I said, let me run this by Bob, and he said, okay, because you're the one I'm interested in. I'm not going to represent the both of you. So I called Bob up and I told him what happened, and he was gracious about it. He didn't like it, but he said, I guess if he's not going to manage us, you might as well go for it. But after that, I think that kind of like seeped into our relationship a little bit. But I would run into him at like the Aspen Comedy Festival and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We would always chat and be very friendly. Very nice guy. And as you know, Sue, he had a very tough life and then unfortunately died in a car accident.
After surviving cancer.
After surviving cancer, after losing a child to cancer. Right. Mm-hmm. And some other very unlucky things that happened to him. But he was a fabulous comedian. And again, for the audience who hopefully you know who he is, but if you don't, you should go find some clips of him on YouTube. Bob was a very straight-laced guy who used to go on stage, and he had, for a beginner, a functional act, but nobody would have pegged him as a star. Mm-mm. And then someplace along the way, he started telling dirty material. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't there, but I guess that started working for him in the clubs. But he would also start performing in a suit and tie, right, which nobody else in the clubs did, except for maybe Argus. And so you had this slightly balding, very diminutive, meek-looking guy doing an act that was really raunchy, and it clicked. And then he started doing Howard Stern, and then he did a Showtime special or a couple, right, and his career took off. And some of my favorite jokes are Robert Schimmel jokes.
And people who know me really well know this story, but I actually dated Robert for a period of time. And I don't know if you knew that.
I did, but I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay. So Robert and I unknowingly was having an affair with Robert. I thought he told me that he had split up from his wife.
Oh.
Right?
Oh.
So I had no idea that, they were separated, but they weren't divorced. So, I used to hang out at his apartment, which was by Fairfax Heights, Ogden Place, wherever. Yeah. And he's come up to San Francisco with me. I'd go visit, my sister, and so the relationship was, as far as I knew, he was my boyfriend. So I'm at his apartment one afternoon, and his sister was visiting from out of town, and she was friendly with his wife. And she called his wife, unbeknownst to me, to tell her that I was in the apartment.
Ooh.
So his wife, you remember Vicky? She actually looked like Kathy Moriarty from.
Yeah, she's a very pretty woman. Bull. Yes.
She was beautiful. This like tall blonde, I'm like, the polar opposite. So his wife comes in and surprises us both. and starts screaming at him and yelling at me. And she picked up an iron and threw it at my head, and I ducked. And it's just a joke that I have with his brother Jeff now. He's like, we'll always have you almost getting hit in the head with an iron by Vicky. But it was crazy, and I was so pissed off at him because I wasn't somebody that like would do something like that to another woman. It just pissed me off. But anyway, we remain friends for forever.
Yeah. So interesting. So then you did stand up for a number of years, and then segued
almost 30.
Yeah, but at some point segued into television writing, and then producing reality shows, right?
Yeah, I got to a point in my career where I was doing great. I'd done a lot of TV appearances, and I got very involved with USO. So I did traveled all over the world doing USO shows, and I had been in a relationship with Kenny Ober, who I had been in for a long, long time, and I was just at the point where I just didn't want to be on the road anymore. And I felt like, no one was going to develop a show around Sue Kolinsky. I just didn't feel like I had that kind of act that someone was going to do that for me. So,
by the way, just to interrupt your story, I did, but they wouldn't cast you.
I remember. Yeah.
But we'll talk about that another time.
We'll talk about that another time.
And now we'd like to welcome back our sponsor, BetterHelp, the website that asks, what interferes with your happiness? Is there something preventing you from achieving your goals? Well, if there is, BetterHelp will assist your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You'll connect in a safe and private online environment, which makes it so convenient. You can send a message to your counselor anytime you want, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without ever having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room or risk getting COVID-19 by going to a doctor's or a therapist's office. And it's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. The service is available for clients worldwide, and there's a broad range of expertise available, which may not be locally available in many areas. Anything you share is confidential, it's convenient, it's professional, and it's affordable. So, if you want to start living a happier life today, you'll get 10% off your first month when you visit our sponsor at betterhelp.com/moreperfect. So join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/moreperfect for your free trial. Do it today.
Sue, around what year are we talking about that this is all going down, that you're getting tired of the road?
It was probably in the mid-90s. I had a very good friend of mine who was a writer, and we teamed up and we wrote a bunch of spec scripts. We wrote an Ellen, we wrote Mad About You, and we wrote Larry Sanders. And we got represented by CAA off of those scripts. And we ended up getting a writing job on Brotherly Love. So that show went off the air, and then we ended up getting Sex and the City. And it was quite a departure.
Didn't we all, though? Didn't we all get that?
Yeah. That was a gift for all of us.
But what was really cool about it was that I knew one of the executive producers, Michael Patrick King, who I knew from my New York days, and we were very good friends. I actually co-signed his first credit card. He could not get a credit card. So wow. Anyway, we go in, and this was really, really cool because HBO, we found out that HBO, Carolyn Strauss, who's big executive there, who was also I was friendly with, I was told that Michael and Darren Star were not they're not hiring anybody. They're just going to do the show by themselves. And we said, we're two New Yorkers. We're, we are so right for the show. We actually had created a show that was kind of similar to Sex and the City, but it was only with two women. And so we just felt like they have to see us. So our agents at CAA were like, no, they're not seeing anybody. I can't get you a meeting. I called up Carolyn Strauss myself And I said, Carolyn, come on, you got to get me a meeting. So she made sure that, I got the meeting. So we go in, and the Larry Sanders that we wrote was a really, really funny Larry Sanders, and they really responded to it. And we had a great, great meeting. And then, and I truly believe this is the reason why we got the gig. As we were leaving, Michael looks at me and says, what do you think about anal sex? And I looked at him and I said, only if there are Quaaludes involved. And they laughed so hard. And we got a call the next day that we got the gig. So I did that I only wrote on the first season. And then my partner and I split up. She wanted to write by herself. I was pissed off about it, but that's what she wanted. Like, you and Robert, you went separate ways.
Right.
And then I ended up, because of my love for sports, I'm a golfer. So I used to get booked on these celebrity golf tournaments where you would go for a long weekend, and you do like one night of stand up. And the rest of the time, you would just hang out with celebrities and then play golf. Mm-hmm. And you get per diem. I mean, it was like we were golfing with like Samuel Jackson. Bill Gates came. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So Steve Mason, who I'm now doing my show with, he was doing his show. It was in Seattle. And so he traveled up to Seattle to do his radio show. We did play-by-play with Mark Harmon and another comedian. I was up in the booth. And he just thought I was really funny, and I knew about sports. So he bumped into me in the lobby of the hotel one night, and he said, do you want to come on my show tomorrow morning? And you got to be there at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I looked at him and I said, well, who canceled? And he said, no one canceled. And I said, oh, of all the celebrities that are here, you want to interview Sue Kolinsky? You're so full of shit. And he said, no. I really, really want you to come on the show. So I came on the show, had a great time with him, and then became a regular on his show. Every Friday I would come on and do like this bit. And then he got a radio gig on morning radio in New York. And he was looking for a co-host. And he asked me if I would move to New York and be his co-host. I didn't have to audition. I just got the gig based on his recommendation. And I did morning radio on WNEW, the station I grew up listening to as a kid. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we did that for like a year and a half. And then I came back and got, started working on the Osbournes. I worked on Ellen's second sitcom. That was a nightmare. And that's a whole nother show. It was a complete nightmare. She's everything that you think she is, as far as what everybody say.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
She was horrible, and she was very, very mean to me, and I hated it. But then I got the Osbournes, so I left the show to do the Osbournes.
That was really the Osbournes was the catalyst of the reality TV show boom, especially the celebrity edition of reality television, right? There'd been the real world, there'd been reality TV, but you're talking about the Osbournes was the birth of celebrity reality TV, like we know
of that day in the life kind of documentary reality
right.
TV.
Right.
Yes,
right.
But it was something that celebrities hadn't really been involved in reality TV. It was a thing that unknowns did, right? And the Osbournes was really the first example of the names getting into reality TV.
Mm-hmm. Well, reality TV was kind of like shunned. It's like, ooh, you work in reality TV. Ugh, it was kind of like the bastard child of scripted television, compared to scripted television. But it was amazing. And unfortunately, a lot of shows that came after kind of screwed with what we did, because that show was not scripted at all.
You didn't have to tell them. You didn't have to say, more conflict would help.
Never. You never told Ozzy what to say, never told Sharon, never told the kids. We just put cameras on them and they did what they did. It's the opposite of how it is now. We shot hundreds and hundreds of minutes of footage, and we were a slave to the footage. Whatever we shot, we had to make a show. There was no going back and doing a pickup scene or, going back and doing an interview or, very rarely did we have like on the fly, like moments where you would like talk to somebody and say, how did you feel about that? It was all whatever they did, we made a show. And that
it was reality TV.
It was
actually
TV.
reality TV.
And that doesn't happen anymore. And it hasn't for a long, long time.
No, now they create conflicts, and people know that, hey, if I become a B word on the show, I'm more likely to get airtime, and I'll be the next Omarosa. So people play to that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you know what? That's incredible. I worked on several reality shows in Cincinnati. They would come here, and I would staff them and worked on. I'm not going to mention their names, and they were totally not real, and it was a shame. In fact, it was really a disappointment to, and in fact, I turned down one that was being shopped by one that was really bad because I knew it was going to be a disappointment. But that makes me feel so good that some of them were real.
Yeah, the Osbournes was the first of its kind.
I really want to ask you something, Sue, if you don't mind.
No.
I live here in Toronto, and when I get out and I got to think every once in a while, there's a cemetery I go to, and I go and I stand there where Corey Haim is buried. And so I want to ask you, because, Kevin, you and I'm in the generation just behind you guys, right? So you guys influenced my generation, right? And that's why I know a lot about the things you guys did, and despite the fact I wasn't there, right? But Corey Haim was this part of my life. You're talking about we're the same age, came up at the same time, things like that, or whatever. And so I meet a lot of people that don't get it when I say I have a love for the Coreys, right? Because that's my generation. It's part of my generation or whatever. But then when it comes to reality shows, I know what's real and what's not. And I know that some of it's scripted, but it's not. But I so want to know anything you'll tell me about the two Coreys.
The two Coreys.
And why it means something to me. I mean, why the Coreys would mean something in my generation.
It was sad, to be honest with you, working on the two Coreys, because Corey Haim, he had substance abuse problems, and it was very, very sad. And I mean, talk about stuff not being real. I mean, it was supposed to be in LA. We were in Vancouver. There would be signs in French. Yeah. We had couldn't use any signs. Yeah. I felt bad.
And by the way, I just want to ask you real quick, just to clear my mind of this. I heard that they intended that show to be pretty real, and then, or it was the other way around. It was intended to be kind of a comedic show, and then it went off the rails and it became more real, or the other way around. Like the tone of the show was never consistent, and it seemed like it switched its format between seasons.
Well, yeah, it was dictated by what was going on. That's the thing. All plans. What's that expression? The best laid plans.
So I'm not familiar with the show. Can you give us a little background on what it was supposed to be and what happened?
Corey Haim and Corey Feldman were childhood stars who were very, very good friends, and then they, kind of had a falling out because Corey Haim was a drug addict, and then Corey Feldman, ended up getting married, and he had a kid, and they wanted to shoot. And we're talking about,
like I said, two of the most known actors of my generation, right? I mean, they were child actors that became teen actors that became adult actors.
Exactly. So the show was supposed to be shot in LA, and then because of some drug situation with Haim, he couldn't leave Canada, so they had to shoot it there. And it was just sad. He was like living in a studio apartment with his mom, and so he goes to move in with Feldman. And it's not Feldman's real house, Feldman, because Feldman lives in LA. So it's like this really, really nice house in Vancouver. And I felt bad for Haim because, in order to be in the show, you had to go along with it. This is what they created, kind of like Haim, a little bit down on his luck a bit. They didn't really get into too much of the drug stuff. I only worked on it the first season. But, he walks in and he's like, wow, this place is amazing. And, we're all like feeling like, oh, this poor guy has to act like Corey Feldman is really successful and lives in this beautiful house when he kind of lived in a shitty house in the valley, and it just became sad for me because, I remember him, I'm older than him, but I do remember the two of them. He just couldn't get his act together, and it just got worse the second season. But the first season, he was doing drugs. So, it was really hard. We shot a lot of stuff we couldn't use because he was high and you couldn't even understand what he was saying.
Sue, great story. I'm glad all my, between him and Ellen, I'm glad all my confirmations are confirmed. All my suspicions are confirmed.
I never worked with someone that I would call an asshole. I worked on, a couple of dozen series. I worked with people who had some quirks, but no one that was ever outwardly mean to anyone in my presence. So I guess I must have led a blessed television life.
I will take that as a compliment.
Now, as a quick aside, though, let me ask this, though. Is that the difference between a writer and a producer?
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, they're similar roles. They're different roles. We all know them. They're in the credits and all that. So when Kevin says, I've never had to work with an asshole, I go, is that because he's a writer? You know what I mean? Is a producer more? But hold on. Is a producer more or less or as equally likely to work with, a dick bag?
I don't think it really matters. I didn't spend a lot of time with her because she wasn't in the writer's room. Some stars, come into the writer's room and kind of hang out and, but she wasn't one of those. I think that, and I never met her before I got the job. I got the job because a good friend of mine, Carol Leifer, was one of she was one of the executive producers, and they liked my spec script, and she gave me the job. So I don't know whether I reminded Ellen of someone she didn't like, or she just maybe because I got the job because I was friends with somebody who had a high position on the show. I don't know what it was, but I have never been treated so badly by anyone that I ever worked with. And, I think I'm a really, really nice person. I get along with everybody. So it was really horrible. I mean, and I'll tell you, because I've talked about it, we would do run-throughs. We would do table reads, which is after the script is written, you sit in a room and you sit like in a big square and the cast reads the script out loud. And we would all sit down, we'd have our coffee and everything. And she would go around this square and she would say, good morning. And she would say hello to everybody. So she would say hello to the person to the right of me, would not say hello to me, and say hello to the person to the left of me. Every table read. And I was like, what? I mean, like, I didn't even know her. She just targeted me. And then, like I said, Jeff Stilson worked on the show. Sometimes she'd be mean to him, but she was always mean.
What was your job on this show?
I was a staff writer, so I was low on the totem pole. But she knew me. We were comedians. I mean, I had been a comedian before she was a comedian. She knew who I was. She was just relentlessly mean to me.
Maybe because she thought you were sleeping with Argus.
Well, she wouldn't have cared about that.
well, Sue, you have been a delight on this show. I don't know why you would have said that. I have thought, I mean, compared to Kevin, you are much.
Kevin, you're out.
I was about to say, I've read the stuff with
I've been
your
kicked out of better
on.
places in this joint.
I was just about to say, I've read the stuff with Kelton and Sue's name on it, and I've read Kevin's name, and I'm not laughing when I just see Kevin's name on it.
Hold on.
So, Kevin, let's go back to you. You were producing a show. It was in a show that you wrote when I came in to audition?
Yes. So I was a television writer who had moved up through the ranks and was a producer on Night Court and on another show or two. And then as you want to happen in your career, you get asked.
By the way, for the listeners, I just want to say that Kevin's underselling himself right now.
Yeah, Kevin, big deal. It was a very big deal.
He's kind of playing it like, and then I caught the bus, and then the next thing you know, it was a very lucrative time. He was very in demand.
Oh yeah, he knew Marky Post. I mean, come on.
So
I mean, we all did back then, Greg.
Well, sure.
So I really actually just rode from credit to credit to credit. But at one point, I was asked if I had any series ideas, and I'll give you the backstory that you wouldn't know this, Sue, but you probably knew that my brother, Bobby Kelton, who was also a comedian, was dating for a long time a woman named Rhonda Shear.
Absolutely.
And Rhonda had a show called Up All Night, and she was sort of like a celebrity. She considered herself a comedian, although she wasn't really a stand-up per se. But she was just, a very attractive woman, voluptuous woman. She was a personality, and she was known. So I came up with an idea that I was going to develop around her, where this was back in the mid-'90s when the idea of a show within a show was still a relatively fresh idea. And I came up with this concept of someone who was the host of a late-night infomercial series and what their life was like, and the producers and the people that helped them produce this infomercial. The original idea was for Rhonda. I couldn't sell it with her. We ended up attaching Jeff Altman to it. And we'll talk about that project in a second. But Sue, you know this, and maybe our audience knows this. Then, many years later, after they broke up, Rhonda moved back to New Orleans, where she's from, and she became a late night infomercial pitch person on QVC and has made $1 gazillion selling women's lingerie.
That's right. I know. Someone told me she was selling bras. I was like, oh,
She's
my God.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to jump in here just so you guys will know. For the audience, okay, Rhonda Shear, yes, was a comedian. And many people know that she was also the TV host of Rhonda's Up All Night, which was on, I believe, the USA Network in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was much like the horror movie host shows of the day,
Elvira,
where she was the guest host that was the bumper between movies all night long on UHF stations, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was very popular. That was what launched her and made her very popular. But she wasn't just on QVC and Home Shopping Network and all that selling those bras. She invented and owns the patent on it. Rhonda Shear is the patent owner of what would later become the Wonder Bra. And that's where she made her money.
Oh, yeah. And I heard this number someplace. I don't know whether it's exact or not, but I heard the number $70 million. So who knows?
Yes.
And,
wow. She wasn't just like, she was the pitch person on TV for it, but she also created it, like the patents in her name. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what made her her fortune.
So, but anyways, like I said, I couldn't set it up with her. So we ended up going with a comedian named Jeff Altman, a very funny guy. And I had written this script, and there was a woman producer, a character, and I wrote it with Sue in mind. And then there was another character who was sort of like the money man, and I wrote it with another friend of ours in mind, Mark Goldstein, who's no longer with us. And I was able to get you and Mark in for auditions, and I lobbied for you as strongly as I could. They would not let me cast you, and they went with some other people, and it was just a one-off pilot that never went anyplace. What's your memory of that, Sue?
My memory was that it was probably the loosest I had ever been in an audition. I felt so comfortable at that audition. And then I remember, so I got called back.
Mm-hmm. And what year are we talking about, guys? Around
94.
It was 94. Okay.
Yeah.
So that I was being put on tape. And I remember I had to hold up a white piece of paper that said my name. And I actually said to the camera, I'm picking myself up from the airport.
That's right.
And you guys really, really laughed. And I totally thought, I am getting this gig. Kevin's a friend of mine. There's no way in the world I'm like,
it was written for you.
I know. And it was just so much fun. All right. So I don't get it. And I'm, of course, disappointed. Years later, Ken Ober and I go to, what's her name? She was on the Brady Bunch. She played the youngest sister.
Maureen McGovern.
not Maureen McGovern. She was the young one, she had a radio show with
Susan Olsen.
Susan
right.
Olsen. So Kenny had a radio show with Susan Olsen. So we go to her wedding, and I'm sitting at a table, and I don't know who the guy was, but he was either an executive or for the network or whatever, producer, whatever. And he looked at me and he said, "You came in and read for me on this pilot with Jeff Altman. And I have to tell you that to this day, I am so upset that I didn't cast you."
Oh, good.
Wow.
Good. Was his first name Richard? I think that's the guy.
I don't remember.
Okay.
But a part of me wanted to just say, I wish you never told me that. Because I was so upset when it happened, because I knew that I would have been really great in the part, of all the things that I went up for, like you said, you wrote it for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was kind of funny.
I'm glad that you told me that story. I didn't know that. And by the way, the reason that I brought up Maureen McGovern was she was another person that read for it. And a woman who was an MTV, a big VJ back then.
Martha Quinn.
Martha Quinn came in and wrote and read for it.
That's my teenage crush.
And she was really cool to meet.
I'm kidding. She's actually still my crush.
Oh yeah,
I have a question. I gotta ask you this, Sue, if you don't mind. As we've been talking a few times, the name Ken Ober has come up. Mm-hmm. Kevin and Greg and I are familiar with the name, but for everybody else who isn't, there's people of my generation that will know him from one major project. But tell me a little bit about Ken Ober and your relationship with him. Do you mind if I ask about it?
No, not at all. So he was, comedian. When I moved back to New York after living in LA for a while, I met him at the Comedy Cellar, in the hallway at the Comedy Cellar. And I actually thought he was an agent because he had a little briefcase that he was carrying. And
he also had that look, right? He always looked like he was an agent, right? He had like a he just looked like he always
on.
looked like he always looked like a business guy or a Wall Street guy, right?
Kind of. And so, whatever, we struck up a conversation, and, we started dating soon after that. So Kenny was the host of Remote Control, which was the first game show that was ever on MTV. And that put him on the map.
Right. Adam Sandler got his start on that.
Adam Sandler, Dennis Leary.
Colin Quinn.
Colin was his co-host.
Colin was the co-host.
There were some young ladies also who.
Oh, well, it was what's her name? Coppola, one of the Coppola nieces, or one of.
But
Coppola.
The breakout,
Kari Wurr, yeah, that's
who I saw like a couple of years ago, and that was really fun seeing her.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of talent, fun.
I mean,
show.
there may be people in the audience listening that don't know. Like Remote Control was the first game show on MTV. And it was a really big deal. We're talking about when music videos were still a huge deal. And it was done like it was a game show, but you had to know about music videos. But the biggest breakouts from that show, and it was huge at the time, people don't remember what a big deal was, were Ken Ober and Colin Quinn. Those were the two biggest breakouts from that. And, Colin Quinn, for his career now, he seemed to disappear like right away, right? But Ken was
really.
No. What I mean is, I'm trying to say is, Colin disappeared, and then there was the SNL. There was that boom kind of resurgence.
Yes.
Colin, I didn't mean like he went away for good. I mean, I'm talking about there was a blip,
right.
And there was even a joke about it on Ben Stiller had his own show, the Ben Stiller Show on Fox. Right?
Yeah, sure.
And there was a joke on there with Colin Quinn where he was like, he appeared as himself and he was screaming like, "I have to be on the road 50 weeks a year, damn it. Remote Control money ran out," or something like that. And then he got SNL, and he would always drop Remote Control as a punchline, right? When he was on there. But I mean, like a lot of people know Ken Ober as, he was the host of Remote Control, but man, he did so much in the business, like before and after that. He was that guy that was always there behind the scenes. I don't think a lot of people realize how much he did,
Yeah, he actually was a co-executive producer of Colin's show, Tough Crowd, in the later years of that show. And, he did Parenthood, the original Parenthood, that was based on the movie. He did the original one. He was, he was a, lead character in that. And he hosted a ton of stuff. And it's ironically, he was saying that when he got remote control, I was the one who told him because they couldn't find him. He was in Hawaii with a fellow comedian, and they called me and said, "Where's Kenny? We got to, let him know that he got remote control." I called him, and he was pissed off because he thought it was going to hurt his career. He was up against Danny Bonaducci. It was between the two of them. And he got it.
Yeah. It's funny, these things that now I'm so much older that I look at that are like a blip in my pop culture life or whatever, that I go, they were huge at the time. Remote control was a big deal, and now when I talk about it with my peers, people my age, they go, "Oh yeah, that thing." I go, "That thing was huge." Now we look and go, "Oh yeah."
Yeah, it was a fun show.
Well, obviously the four of us could continue talking about this stuff on and on and on. And frankly, Sue, if you'll ever come back, I'm pretty sure I can get unanimous consent that we would love to have that. But I want to talk before we wrap up this episode a little bit about what you're doing now. And then Ward, also, I want to talk about a project that you're going to be working on. But Sue, you've got a new Netflix cooking show coming out, right?
Yeah, it's called Best Leftovers Ever, and it's a really fun, cool show, and how timely. It's skilled home chefs, cooks, cooks really, who have to make gourmet meals from leftovers. And it's really fun, and it's hosted by Jackie Tone, who was on the wrestling, female wrestling, Glow.
Glow. Oh yeah.
She was one of the characters on Glow. And she's really funny. And this guy, oh God, why am I blanking on his name? Oh, David So, and Rosemary, she's a British chef. So I have to look up her name because you're going to have to edit this. So I know what I'm talking about. Rosemary
Clooney.
I don't think who I opened for.
Wow. Did you really?
Yeah.
Cincinnati connections.
Yeah, that's right.
Nick Clooney bought me a drink once when I was 16.
Really?
Well, yeah, it got me in trouble too, obviously. That's
George Clooney and I buried a hooker in the desert outside Nevada. Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
And I often get mistaken for him. So
I worked on a George Clooney movie once, but that's another story. And that's my only name drop with George Clooney. He passed me once, and he said, "What do you think of my movie?" And I said, "I think you're doing an okay job." He goes, "Okay, then." And because I worked on local films whenever they would come into town, and he's like, "Okay, good, nicest guy ever." And that's my only conversation I had. Nick Clooney, when I was 16, I would sneak into jazz bars, and Nick would walk in, and he'd say, and he'd buy everyone drinks. And the next day I told my parents, I was like, "I saw Nick Clooney. He bought me a drink last night." And they were like, "What were you doing in a bar?" And I was like, fucking Nick Clooney. Hit it to me again. So that's
Sue, you were going to tell us about...
Okay,
I'm sorry, Sue.
No. Wait, hold on. George Clooney and I were burying this hooker in the desert in Nevada. And the whole time he's like, "Let me tell you about what this hayseed in Ohio said about my movie this one time."
You're not doing it right, because he was chewing gum the entire time. He was like,
I messed it. Oh, yeah.
So, all right. So Best Leftovers Ever. So it's hosted by Jackie Tone, and the two celebrity judges are David So, who really, really funny, great guy, and Rosemary Schrager. And it's on Netflix, and
is it on now, or is it coming on soon?
Yeah, it's going to be. I don't even know when. We finished posting it in July, and it probably won't air until sometime next year.
I love those baking shows on Netflix, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
It's fun. And basically now I'm doing my Culture Pop podcast with Steve, and it's really fun. We've got, we get great guests. We've had Bryan Cranston on, we had Michael Imperioli on, directors, writers, comedians. Susie Essman, came on.
Cool.
Peter Melman. So we do that, usually once or twice a week. And
that's hip.
That's great and fun, and
cool.
and I'm trying to get my golf game back that I never really had.
And Ward, you have something coming up. You were telling us during the week about it. Are you surprised? You mean Triassic Squad? Hell yeah! It's gonna be a lot of fun, man. It's great.
What is it? I co-wrote and have co-produced this movie called Triassic Squad, which is being put out by a company called The Asylum. And if you don't know who they are the people behind Sharknado. The popular Sharknado series. Yep. So I have this, I don't know where it's going just yet. I know it's going to one of the streaming platforms, but it's January 29th. It's going to be coming out. It's all about mercenaries hunting down lab-created dinosaurs.
You had me at mercenaries.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so
and it stars.
Go ahead.
January 29th. Yeah. And it stars Linnea Quigley, who you may know from Return of the Living Dead, and also, most importantly, the star of the movie, Michael Paré, also from Eddie and the Cruisers, Streets of Fire, and other films. So, if you know The Asylum, it's like I said, Sharknado. It's a schlockbuster, right? So it's going to be fun. My writing partner and I put it together a couple of years ago as something just for them, and then they called us up and said, okay, let's do it 2 years later. So
Michael Paré is our generation's Jan Michael Vincent. So
yeah, without the alcohol issues.
No.
Is that I don't know.
I don't know for sure about that, but he's kind of one of those guys who's so good, and yet you whatever happened to him, I
know he was I had such a crush on him.
Both of them,
yeah, really.
I know.
Look at you, both of them.
Jan Michael Vincent is
he was really handsome,
really handsome, and ended up on goddamn Airwolf, which we could talk about Airwolf for quite a while on that shitty sixth season where they sold the plane. They sold that helicopter, and I don't even want to talk about it. It's such a shit
don't do that.
show.
Don't do that to yourself.
I know.
Well, boy, this has been a fun 2+ hours that we've been talking to each other, and hopefully we'll do some more. So, to our audience, thanks for listening. If you like our podcast, please link us on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. And also check out our Facebook group that we talked about, Open Fire Politics. We're all there. We'd love to see you there, too.
All right, Sue, it's been a delight.
Same here.
So
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Ward,
it was really fun.
As always, it's been enjoyable.
Always a pleasure.
Kevin,